So this is Don't Quit Your Day Job, Lean Startup in the Enterprise. I'm Peter Pascale, and hopefully you're in the right session. So a little bit more about me. First of all, I am not the world's greatest expert on this topic. I subscribe to this philosophy that none of us is as smart as all of us. And in fact, despite the history of crowds proving themselves really dumb, I hope that to leave a little bit of time at the end for you to add or throw in some ideas on this topic. So my goal is to aim for a little bit less than a full period of content, and then to bring some, I've got some specific questions for you. In terms of what I do in the day job that I haven't quit, that lends some of the expertise for this talk, I am the Director of Product Strategy for Pearson VUE. We do computer-based testing globally for everything from IT licensure, academic exams, medical credentialing, engineering credentialing, and so on. And my team in product strategy, we work on product direction about 3 months to 5 years out. So we're looking at competitive analysis, market demands, as well as how to either expand our existing products or grow new ones. So there's a concept within Lean Startup. I'm borrowing a lot of ideas from Lean Startup. That's essentially where the content, the ideas that we're applying at Pearson VUE are coming from. But there's a key part of this that you have to understand that influences how we look at things, and that's this bolded portion. Human institutions designed to create new products and services under conditions of extreme uncertainty. So today we're talking about things that you can do when you don't know where you're going, you don't know what the market needs. So there's a number of things I could talk about today. Raise your hand if you're here for the boring shit. All right, that guy works in a really boring enterprise. Hopefully I will not disappoint you. No. We apply Lean Startup ideas to both traditional product development and our innovative ideas, but this talk is about the innovation product ideas. If you want to talk to me a little bit more about what we're doing on traditional product development and how we apply Lean Startup ideas, I'm all willing to do that. That's kind of a separate topic. And hopefully, no boring shit. So back to this kind of concept, right? How do we address product development when we're in a race with others to discover the way? We don't know where we need to go to get product market fit. We don't know exactly what is going to make for that product market fit. So we have this one principle that guides our thinking throughout the rest of this talk. What would startup do, right? The idea basically is that if we are going to be in a race to develop products in the face of extreme uncertainty, when we have a lot of assumptions that we haven't tested about the product market fit, we have to employ the lessons that startups do. To be competitive, it's not just these are good ideas, but to compete effectively, we have to be employing these ideas. In fact, I would posit that this next slide actually covers all the other ideas that enterprise might want to use in innovative product development. In other words, if you're thinking as an enterprise that you're going to compete in innovation, but you're going to do it in an enterprise-y way, find another enterprise. So my whole fundamental kind of theory about this is that if you want to be successful, you have to leverage these techniques. You can't say, we're going to use stage gate product development methodologies, and that's going to help us invent a new product. We're going to use big investment review board process because it's worked for the last 10 years for our business as usual projects, and that will let us invent new products. So keep this in mind. That's kind of my bias. If this is what you're doing, you need to think like a startup. So you may have come thinking, well, can the enterprise really do this? So just to give you a little bit of a taste, and this is kind of one of the things I want you to think about. I have questions for you about this. There actually are some enterprise advantages to entering into innovative product development. This first is this idea that the world is yours to lose, potentially. This may not be true with every idea, but oftentimes in an enterprise, you've got an idea, and you happen to be holding as a large enterprise a lot of the pieces necessary to bring that idea to completion. Ben Moore who many of you used to know in the startup and Ruby community, used to tell me that if you had a great idea and you were passionate about it, you need to be in the right environment in which to implement that idea. And sometimes that might be a large company. Pearson, where I work, is the world's largest digital education company, right? We service millions and millions of learners a year globally. And we consider every human being on the planet a potential customer because everybody has to learn. So if I come up with an idea and it's related to something tangential to education, this might not apply. But if I have an idea that everybody who's learning, everybody who's in education needs, I have an interesting advantage because I have those connections, I have those customers, I have the products that they're using already. So in some cases, enterprises have the building blocks. If I was a startup, and we're going to look at one of these ideas where this really shows up as a good example. If I was a startup and I needed access to those customers, I'd have to work with Pearson or someone like them. The second one is don't overlook the existing customers of the enterprise. So we have a product that, and it's a new product, and one of its target markets is IT companies. Raise your hand if you could get a phone call with Oracle next week and pitch them something. What about Cisco or VMware? The Pearson VUE right now, these are our existing customers. And so we have an advantage that we can get that phone call. We can get our sales pitch in front of them. Don't overlook cases where the enterprise actually has relationships with perhaps early adopters or a lot of companies. Now, it's not all roses. There's some disadvantages as well. I think one of the things that I've seen, and when I've talked to folks in our community, they've seen the same thing as well. I think enterprises forget how challenging it can be to acquire customers. So you end up with an enterprise plan that looks like in red. We're going to grow our customers, and that growth is going to happen really quickly. And they forget how long it took Facebook or Pinterest or Twitter, let alone other less kind of flagship modern-day companies to acquire those customers. This has a trade-off because there's a significant amount of investment. You have to play a bit of a long game to acquire those customers. So in the blue represents more the reality, but sometimes the enterprise isn't prepared to make that type of investment. The entire enterprise machine is often geared towards a return on investment that comes much sooner than these long games would allow. There's a second part of investment dynamics within the enterprise, which I think you should be aware of, that is not ideal. But it's best illustrated by starting with a standard startup scenario first. And that's this idea that over time, you might make some traction, get an initial round of investment, and then be able to take that investment, develop more in the product, perhaps develop more customers or revenue or product features, whatever. But a true startup has the ability to go back to the investment market and do a second round of funding. And the interesting aspect about startup is you can approach different communities at these different milestones. You do not have to approach the same investors at Series B points that you did at Series A. This is really not true for the enterprise. You have one investor if you have an innovative product idea or an incubator business. So you approach that company initially at an early stage. You get that initial investment. But the red line might represent dynamics happening within that company that are beyond your control. Leadership could change. Their market position could change. Or they could experience disruptive events. A great example locally here is I would imagine that Target's tolerance for collecting consumers' credit card information and letting you check out in the middle of the store changed after their challenge last year. So those types of things aren't in your control. A lot can happen between that. But unlike a traditional startup, you cannot approach a different set of investors, typically. You have to go back to Big Pearson, as in a way, if it's, in our case, or your enterprise. So I'm going to talk through a couple example projects, and then we'll look at lessons learned that come out of that. But to understand that, you kind of have to understand what our business unit is. Pearson VUE was actually a startup in the mid to late 90s here. They were just VUE, Virtual University Enterprises. They were bought by Pearson. As I said, our core business is delivering computer-based assessments. So in a typical, roughly annual period, we have about this dynamic going on. A large number of learners asserting skills through exams, and a large number of that type of contact. So let me explain 3 projects, and we'll use these, 2 projects. We'll use these projects to illustrate some of these principles. The first is something we call the Observe app. It's an iPad app for observational testing of driving assessments. One of the things that we deliver is driving assessments in the UK and in Dubai. We also participate in the practical assessment. So in other words, a person riding in the car, a rater riding in the car giving you a score. We'll come back to this one in a second. The other project that kind of helps illustrate some of these principles is something called Acclaim, or your Acclaim. This is a project for, basically you've heard our mission is to help people assert their proficiencies. Today we typically do that through testing. We'd like to expand that. We'd like to be in a position to allow people to get credit for any sort of skill and get that credit whether it was a test or contribution to an open source code repo or a presentation or an online course. We'd like them to be able to get and organize that credit. I have to give a quick shout out to Livefront here because I see some of you in the audience. Livefront is a development partner with us, par excellence, who has helped us. And in fact, I think probably Andy, we're looking quite here at some of your designs too. So helped us on these projects. Now, one other quick aside on the Acclaim project. Back to this point about we're in a race with others to figure out what the market wants. A great litmus test of whether we have to apply startup ideas is who our competitors are. And if you look at Acclaim, 4 out of the 5 competitors are startups themselves. We can't apply traditional enterprise product development approaches and expect to beat these folks. There are a couple other projects. Well, I won't mention them too much, although they come up as a way of illustrating a few other things. Not everything we do is successful or actionable. So we have a few projects where we've gone out and tried to develop new ways of analyzing our test event data to create new security analytics products. We've also attempted to incorporate keystroke biometrics. We have sort of a skunkworks process that lets these things fail fast. Sometimes maybe not fast enough. We'll talk about that in a second. But 2 cases where with a minimal amount of investment, under $12,000, we are also exploring kind of new product ideas. So a summary of each of these then, in order. Observe, this is that iPad app. This is a case where we were doing the computer-based test, but the business did not own the practical assessment. We did not have, we were competing for that. And we were competing with another solution that was pen-based. In other words, today the way this would work, or in the past the way this would work, someone would go out with a clipboard, ride along in the car, and record. Did you stop at the stop sign? Did you make the right turn correctly? The competitors were promoting a pen-based solution, a digital pen-based solution for capturing all of that information. We had a theory that an iPad or a mobile tablet app, iPad was really the only serious tablet offering at the time that we started. But our theory was that an iPad app would be a better way of capturing than paper and would be a better way of capturing than the digital pen. So in this case, we had to compete quickly to win this business. This was, so our minimum viable product, we needed to go to them and test them with an idea and determine whether they would buy without making a significant amount of investment. In the case of our Observe app, that was in the form of high-fidelity mockups. We put together a series of high-fidelity mockups that could be walked through, actually replayed with hotspots. It allowed them to, allowed us to explore whether the tablet was better than paper and whether the tablet would be better than pen. The customer ultimately bought this idea, but one of the things that we learned through the process was the number of really interesting redundancies that paper provides. Right? If you have, you don't lose, you lose paper, but it's also a security blanket, right? People are concerned about where the data goes and when and how reliable or robust the system is. And we were able to work that early feedback and findings about how they use redundancy in paper into ways to make this application viable. We did initial push to production in 60 days, and we're able to retain that, that particular assessment revenue. Again, I'm just previewing these projects so that we can talk about principles learned from these. With the Acclaim project and digital credentials, we had this theory that Mozilla's open badge infrastructure data standard could be used to represent digital credentials effectively, and that if we gave folks a way to organize their skills and experience around badges, an online portfolio, in a sense, organized around badges, that would be compelling and useful for them. Our minimum viable product for this was a product conceptualization, largely proof of concept and mock-up based, as well as career skill surveys. Pearson maintains a set of, they're called Pearson ambassadors. They're higher ed students that basically we can reach out to and survey, and they rarely represent our target market of potential new young professionals. So we're able to survey them with the proof of concept and other ideas and get feedback. Ultimately, we got institutional investment for this project, a significant amount of corporate Pearson investment. In other words, not just local Pearson VUE, but London-based global Pearson. And 10 months later, we did our first public launch. We had a series of private betas last year, but a first public launch in February. The product is called youracclaim.com. You can go and sign up, but you can find that if you're not being issued a badge currently, you really need to be in one of the pilot programs to find it most useful.
Will this work with Coursera, Fidelity, edX?
Those are great examples of the types of customers that are potential customers that are looking to do the same thing, give you credit for skills that you've learned in a variety of different ways.
More specifically for teacher license renewal, like the Minnesota Department of Education?
Yes, actually, we split the market into like IT focus right now and vocational, because both of those are really interested in giving people ways to express their skills. Within that, there's been some contact with teacher certifying bodies. Behind the badge is a whole series of proof of work. And often as a teacher, you have to have that curriculum and other things that you've developed. So this is the type of system that would allow you to build up that digital portfolio.
Specifically in Minnesota, teachers have to have proof of a technology CEU.
Right, right.
Great, as if the Minnesota Department of Education.
Right. So you should talk, I think I know you're a teacher in teaching, so you should talk to me afterwards. So kind of 3 concepts that you can apply that we'll walk through with these project examples. Lean technology, the idea of getting out of the building, and lean measurement. And we have different levels of success with each of these, so I'll give you a little bit of my own self-assessment at the end. The first idea around lean technology, if you go back to what would startup do, they're not buying large amounts of servers. They're not paying for infrastructure up front. Amazon Web Services, Heroku, the push to the cloud and pay-as-you-go has changed all of that. And what that allows you to do is tap into a variable pricing model for a new and emerging business. It also allows you to access some very exciting and very enabling technology. So for us, despite what you might typically think of in the enterprise, on some of these projects, in particular on innovation projects, in particular on Acclaim, it's critical that we can apply the same type of technology approach. We can't compete effectively if we need to wait 6 months to get into the data center, and every release to production takes us 2 weeks to prepare. In the case of the Acclaim project, we're actually leveraging Heroku. We build the web app, and we build a set of RESTful web services. It's a backbone-based JavaScript web client over a RESTful web backend, and we basically eat our own dog food on the web app with those RESTful services. Hosted on Heroku, we're using things like New Relic for monitoring, obviously storing our code in GitHub, which is enabling the cross-collaboration between both in-house and external live-front development teams. A key part of this, though, I think that's critical is to recognize the amount of automation and the amount of ruthless elimination of waste and inefficiencies that the startups go through. In terms of they don't want to have to, if they're going to deploy often to have feature flexibility and nimbleness, they don't want that process to be manual and cumbersome. So we spent time last year investing in DevOps and automated deployment. We have the ability right now to spin up demo environments on the fly. configured for different customers, and the ability to watch builds and push them through different environments on the way to production and basically promote builds from a console. A lot of the current stuff that's happening in DevOps is happening on a project like this. This is a key way for us to stay nimble. And you really need to look at ways in which you're going to make your technology implementation lean to be effective. So this is the enterprise, right? So how do you make this decision? What I just described to you may be darn near impossible in some environments. For us, there were 3 things that we learned. The first, don't underestimate the organization's fear of failure. I can go in and remind people that we took money from Big Pearson, and they're watching. I might as well tell them that we took money from Satan. Not that Pearson is Satan, but not a Freudian slip. But it carries a lot of weight. They do not want to fail in the eyes of the parent company. We took significant dollars. We have to succeed. That organizational fear of failure is really compelling. And it gives us some leeway, particularly with the second idea of asking for forgiveness, not permission. If you go in and think that your best approach is to prove that your in-house people can't do this first, that they can't deploy fast enough or can't provide you servers fast enough, you will fail. You cannot ask for permission. You cannot try to make the in-house model work first. So in a lot of cases, the way I think, though, this is worked best for us, particularly with Acclaim, is we move faster than any permission-based model works. The last thing is, don't forget to remind the organization that this is about tapping into variable cost. So as an example, we pay Heroku, like everybody else does, through credit cards. Fortunately, now it's corporate credit cards. It used to be personal. We were asked by finance to stop doing that. Did you know that you can stop doing that with Heroku? You can pay one time, but you have to pay at the highest amount you think you might need for that year. So despite our desire, and I know if you've worked with finance people, it can be sometimes hard to convince them of this. It was really compelling to say to them, do you want to pay $1,500 a month, or do you want to pay $100,000 all at once, when we don't know where the business is going yet? They're very interested in the $1,500 a month rate relative. So those are 3 things that have helped us that may help you as you try to make this argument. And the second thing you got to do to be successful with lean startup in the enterprise is you have to get out of the building. This concept shows up in a lot. It's in any principles of customer development. It's in Lean Startup Machine. It's in Eric Ries's Blue Book. So let's talk about 2 sides of this. One as a mindset, which is in your control, and one as an overall corporate way of product development, which may not be. And I'll explain what I mean for each. As a mindset, you need to change the way you think about your backlog on an innovation project. On a typical project, a typical run-of-the-mill, business-as-usual product development, you've got a feature backlog, set of features that probably existing customers have requested, and you're just managing that as a queue. On an innovation project, remember, we don't know where we're going and we don't know the way. We need to be able to looking at that not as a list of features, but as a set of opportunities for experimentation and validating those experiments. I like to tell the product manager on Acclaim that I don't give a shit about his backlog, which is a joke, but it's just meant to say, look, what I really care about is the experiments that we're going to design and run. So I'll explain a little bit about how you can do this and how we're starting to do this. Raise your hand if you've seen the validation board from Lean Startup Machine. Okay, so some of you. This is a tool that they've come up with, and they've got really great simple videos online for how to use this. But essentially, it's a way of taking a feature. I'll give you an example. The product manager for Acclaim comes and says, people would like to claim credentials that they have that we don't service. How do we let them register those? Got a great idea, let's develop and do a bunch of stuff on it. And it actually is a really interesting, compelling idea, but we need to stop for a second. What if that's not what the market wants, or it's not going to increase adoption? So we take an idea like that, and you run it through the Lean validation board. Now, I won't walk through all of this because it deserves almost a session of itself. And actually, you could, but essentially, it's a tool that you can use to organize what you know about the customer, what are some of your assumptions, highlight the most risky assumption, and find a way to test that assumption first. So this is helping us to do what I call the 2-20-200 rule. When the product manager first came with this idea for capturing information about credentials, the idea was actually kind of simple, and we could get an intern to do a lot of the heavy lifting. 200 hours of intern time, get this done. Let's just do it, right? But 200 hours is significant. What if we're doing the wrong thing? Can we figure out a way to take 2 hours of effort that lets us decide if 20 hours of effort is worth it, and if so, what we would do? And if that 20 hours pays off, then we would do the 200 hours. For this particular example I've been telling you about, where people would record credentials that they hold but that we don't service. This is just an example that the team did. You can do one of these validation board exercises in less than an hour. This was done in 45 minutes. They identified that their biggest assumption was that people would actually claim credentials they had if they had a way. And they came up with an experiment that they want to run that's based on using Google AdWords to get people to drive people to a survey and see if we can get them to give us the credentials they already hold. Just name them. What do they name? Who decides to name them? We can run this off a banner ad off of our website. So you can get an idea that we can do something here in 2 to 20 hours and get a sense of what the value is for this. This is actually the second pass through this. So sometimes the intent is to take multiple passes through an idea on this. So if you haven't looked at it yet, check out the validation board and look at how you might break your grand idea down into its biggest assumptions and test them. Another thing that we've been successful with is pitching mock-ups and using mock-ups, sometimes not being explicit about how far along we are in product development, so that we can get, because people really react to a high-fidelity mock-up when we say, this is the way, this is what it does, would you use it? In the case of the Observe app, we were able to, like I said before, validate that people found value in a tablet-based solution versus paper. Now, you might say, well, wait a second. Isn't it obvious that a tablet is better than paper? Isn't it obvious that a tablet's better than a digital pen? Sometimes those obvious things they actually don't test out, and you need to get out and test them. One way to do that is with a high-fidelity prototype. A couple examples. My favorite one that I heard recently, major retailer, I won't say who, selling a wide variety of products, wants to extend the customer's experience within the store. So their idea is they use a digital app to let people explore other products within the store. And in the course of doing that, if they don't have that product, let them buy it and send it to their house. Great, right? Swipe people's credit card in the middle of the electronic aisle, send them on their way. They went and talked to real customers, and real customers said that they didn't want that. They were going to be checking out anyways, because this retailer sells milk, and this retailer sells clothes, and this retailer sells all these other things that they're there for. So they wanted a very Menards special order desk where you get a piece of paper experience and walk it up to the cash register and check out once. Completely against what they thought their assumptions were, and completely not with what they thought their modern sensibilities were. But had they tried to swipe people's credit cards in the middle of the electronics aisle, they wouldn't have been successful. So this is just an example. Even when the idea seems obvious, you need to get out of the building. This is actually a tip thanks to my friend Matt, who I was telling about this presentation. This is the Nordstrom, what do they call it, Matt? Innovation Labs. So they had this idea for how they were going to help people develop, purchase sunglasses in the store. And they did a focused 2-week exercise where they bring the development team, they bring a whiteboard, they set up this really nice table of really fancy Macs, and they've got this glass board with their workspace, and they're developing and prototyping first in questions, then in paper, then in real apps, right in the store, and basically building a production app in 2 weeks to drive sales of sunglasses. Definitely getting out of the building. So just kind of to summarize, don't forget that enterprises have customers. You can leverage them, but talk to more than one. Think of things as experiments. But also keep in mind that just like Agile, and where there's a cowboy coding mentality that people mistake for Agile, there is a cowboy lean. There's a lot of discipline the lean startup methodology is meant to be a disciplined approach, so don't overlook that aspect. So I said that there's a second side of getting out of the building that wasn't so easy, and this is about the dynamic in enterprises relating to product development and how they think about it. Obviously, you want to be lean and mean. If there's a scale between lean and mean and enterprisey, what we've found through our experiences and when we talk to others, we hear the same thing. The more money that the enterprise applies, the more enterprisey they want to become. So for us, the more control that we want to have over a project and the ability to execute it fast and quickly and nimbly and testing assumptions, then the more we need to run it with small investments as part of a skunkworks type operation. Because at the other end of the scale are things that the enterprise cares about, like capitalization limits and how they report on their financials, investment review processes, and how they assert to their shareholders they're being wise. So the more money that you take, the more you end up in this end of the spectrum. This is different than a startup, I think, because the more money you take, often if you're with a good investment capitalist, the more they're pushing you to validate your market, understand your customers' problems. The more money you take in the enterprise, the more you butt up against these. For us, this is what the money looks like. When I say skunkworks, for us, we want to do projects that are around 10K. And if they test out, do another round of them, 10K. Or if you had this 220, 200 idea, can we do something for $10 and then $100 and then 10K? And clearly for us, you start to hit cap limits, you start to hit other interesting accounting challenges once you pop over about $100,000. That's been our experience in our organization. Your mileage may vary, but that's the dynamics. You definitely want to be in the control and the skunkworks end. Last point about this, I think you need to think about creating a culture, a lean culture, before you take that investment, because creating after it is really hard. I'll talk about this here in 1 second with lean measurement. I guess that's my segue. So lean measurement, these are a bunch of things that we can measure in the enterprise, right? These are great because they all have one thing in common, right? They're meaningless, and yet the enterprise loves these. The enterprises are large, there's a large number of people, there's politics involved, all sorts of things. You know, but to be fair, a lot of it is just people don't know any better. They revert to what they know, and they know traditional product development, or they know traditional business development. I think that the measurement aspects of lean startup are kind of at least for my experience, have been the hardest to understand. They're the thinnest part of the literature often. But for us, we want to look more towards factors like this. And if you can think about things, think about your problem and measuring it in terms like this, this is basically what helps you focus more on real validation and real progress. So for us, I promised report card. With lean technology, I think we've been pretty successful. Even on the Observe app, that iPad app, we leveraged a set of RESTful web services that we had existing. We're able to build the app on the side. The App Store is another form of Heroku. It's a way to quickly get out and deploy what you need and get it in the customer's hands. Perhaps with the exception of trying to deploy something in Dubai. Just if you ever want an earful, talk to me about iOS market requirements, enterprise license requirements in foreign countries. But still, the same type of idea, you can leverage the App Store for that. We're succeeding. Getting out of the building, I think for us, we're really regrouping. We've had some good early examples, particularly like when we spend that 20 or 100 hours on the paid per prototype. We said, hooray, that's great. We still spent 100 hours on that. Could we have done it in less? With Acclaim, we've had a challenge. We have a set of product features and really great product ideas, and we have to force ourselves to have the discipline to validate them. And lead measurement, I don't know what to tell you there. That has been a real struggle to get the management chain up to the entire corporate level. Unfortunately, one of our projects has, fortunately, one of our projects has visibility with the CEO of Pearson. But there's a trade-off of that, right? And that is, unfortunately, the CEO has visibility for our project. So we trying to get to lean measurements has been tough. So the questions if you have questions, I'd almost rather we talk about them afterwards. I'm interested first in hearing about your ideas, your experiences around one of two themes. One, advantages or disadvantages you think the enterprise has. Or two, let's go back to what would startup do? What are ideas that you think that are present in startup culture, startup methodology, that could be employed to address enterprise innovation challenges?
Okay, I've got one. So one thing you mentioned was that you wanted to, that you thought that the in-house couldn't do it. Maybe it's just the policies around it, that your in-house resources just weren't available. And I was just thinking that that's probably one of the enterprises, or one of the advantages that the enterprise has is they have a bunch of people. And that's the thing that I know startups, just look, everyone's hiring, right? They can't get devs in there to help them. So you've got a pool of devs. So, I mean, and it sounds like you guys went outside to find some of those. So I'm just wondering, what your experience was with that.
We went outside to find a fast start. Our devs are booked, but I think that raises a really good point that I hadn't actually thought of that could become part of this. People always say the enterprises have the ability to scale. In both of these, when Observe hit operations, and we were doing 10,000 examinations a month, when Acclaim now started to get a bunch of customer interest and they want to do a bunch of customer setup, we could go and hire those people. The founder could work nights. We've bought small companies where the founder deploys code. But one advantage we do have, to Brad's point, is we've been able to scale by applying existing resources that know how to work with customers on client setup, or that know how to manage the operational aspects of the program rollout. So that is a good example. Enterprises can often scale certain aspects of the business. Oftentimes that gets called out when you're successful, when you found that idea, when you found that customers, and now you want to scale the business. Other ideas, thoughts? Justin?
So I'm curious if you, or maybe this is a question for the audience, who else is doing this lean startup methodology in their enterprise, and how are they doing it? So maybe
that's a great question. That should be my third question. So show of hands, would anybody say they're interested? Let's start this way. Who has a project that they're interested in applying this to, even if they haven't yet? Okay. That's good. That gives you a sense. There's a fair number of people who think this apply to them. Who would say that you've tried even any startup ideas within your enterprise product development? Okay, a little less, but about, they're coming up and down. About 2/3, okay, of the amount as before. Maybe about 15, 20 people. That's good. Anybody want to talk about an advantage they have or a lesson learned? What technique are you applying to make you successful? Brad added scaling. What else can we add?
Methodology is really important. You can overdevelop and miss your target pretty easily. And in a small company, you just can't afford to make that mistake.
Right.
So really testing, taking a customer on and helping you drive through that development, get to the minimum, and then get your market back.
Yeah. I think that's a really great idea. I think the one thing I would say within the enterprise is they don't understand the MVP. They think it's version 1.0 complete. Right? It's not the simplest thing that you can do to validate that the market will actually pay for something, let's say. So driving that down, I think, is key. A hand in the back?
So I work for a corporation that wanted a rewrite.
A what?
A rewrite.
The big rewrite.
A rewrite, yes. And the interesting thing about a rewrite when you're doing this is that everything has to work, or all the features from the previous version have to somehow magically make it into the you can work, for years and years and years just trying to achieve that goal alone, right?
Right.
While you have this team over here that's also working on the same product, adding features as well. So there came a time where we, as a team, had decided that it's good enough to release. But for
Right.
The company now has 2 verticals that they operate on. So the main point I'm trying to get across here is that releasing often and always checking in with your customer and seeing what interests them, what they're using, what's the core focus of their
Right.
their ability to use the app.
Yeah. The big rewrite is painful. I think that illustrates a good point, though, around if it's a great litmus test to say, are you actually replicating all of the features in the old product? And if so, you've got to figure out, are you really trying to serve a new market? Are you serving the existing? That's a challenging problem. I did one of those projects once. The new product is great, but it does everything the old product does, just better.
So yeah, a lot of times when we're dealing with like enterprise projects, a lot of times we don't necessarily have all the requirements, or there's too many cooks in the kitchen. So for me and for the project that I'm currently on, a big help was rapid prototyping. Like a whole lot of failing early and making sure that when we're checking in with all these different cooks and making sure that it's to their taste, more or less.
Right. No, I think that's a great lesson. Fail fast, fail early. I wonder, too, if that could show up in measurement, because although it's really probably wouldn't be received really well, how many times have you failed? How many pivots have you made? How many times have your assumptions turned out to be completely wrong? The thing that's a little tough in the enterprise is no one likes to hear, hey, we were completely wrong. But if you can explain to them that you were completely wrong in the context of, it's one thing to say, we were completely wrong and we spent $1 million. And another thing to say, we were completely wrong, but we spent 2 hours and then we went and surveyed 20 people. Colin?
Peter and I used to work together, so I went to a startup. But I still love Pearson. With that said, so the claim started as a hackathon project. I mean, how did that help sell in the idea?
So that's right. There's an early stage of a claim where there was a group that worked on it as a pure proof of concept. There's 2 sides to this. Actually, this is a really interesting point. Here's a technique you could employ in the enterprise, and then I'm going to tell you why it's incomplete. But it's a good starting point. One is corporate hackathons or dev group hackathons. We have a pan-Pearson hackathon. Everybody competes twice a year, globally around the world. You're watching teams in London and San Francisco doing work while you're doing work. But also, we have teams here in Bloomington that just do their own hackathons. Very good idea. Don't overlook the value of motivating developers and giving people a chance to try something new. We have had interns propose ideas in those experiences that are really interesting or change the way the team thinks. But here's where they're incomplete. And even though, so a claim came out of an extended proof of concept. I would liken it to like an extended. There's a group called Future Technologies within Pearson that actually hacked on the idea to develop a proof of concept for a while. Where they fall down is they don't validate the business model. They get too caught up in the technology. So I receive, as the director of product strategy, the output of hackathons, and they're great. And often my team has been putting input into them. But a lot of times, Colin was sort of the victim of this once. Phenomenal idea, mobile NFC for, you have a real dummy, medical dummy, and you'd have to use a mobile device to check certain data about it. And then we have to validate afterwards that it's valid and we could sell it from a business perspective and what the market is. It was a teaching and training thing for nurses. We service nurses. It was a great idea. Actually, it won. So we'll give Colin serious credit there. But what I would like to see added to hackathons is passes through the validation board. The Lean Startup Machine runs training as weekend events, 2 days. And in those 2 days, you make 3 to 5 passes through that validation board to arrive at a solution. And in between, you're surveying people and setting up surveys, calling people, cold calling businesses to validate your ideas. If the Lean Startup Machine can have you do that in a weekend, you can do it as part of a hackathon. Some hackathons incorporate this idea. Startup Weekend does. My alma mater runs a hackathon, McAllister, that they call Macathon, and it's incomplete. Pure coders lose. You have to have both sides. If you're doing corporate work, do the hackathon, but look at incorporating business model validation as part of it. And we're actually starting to push, you can tell this is a kind of a hot button issue for me because I'm talking too long about it. We're starting to push our corporate people to incorporate the validation board into the future tech hacks and the Pan Pearson hackathons.
I work for IBM, and two things is that large enterprise like that can levy a tax against all its brands and products. It's great because you really want money. It's bad because all those brands and products have to cut part of what they're doing. So it's kind of a two-edged sword. One of the things I tried here recently, which is kind of interesting, I can't say it's completely successful that we have to play. Taking a large block of almost like investment money that normally you'd have to go and mix people with a lot of paper exercises, please give me all the money. Instead, they have this thing called I Fund It. And they take all the money and they distribute it equally to a set of stakeholders. And then they hold something like a hackathon, but you vote with the dollars you've given out. And so
Nice.
whatever team makes it do that 220, 200 the fastest and has deliverable tools is basically competing for that limited amount of resources based on the dollars worth.
I love that idea. I think that's a really strong idea. So we definitely have to give IBM credit. I know there are a lot of companies trying to do this. Pearson has a couple different approaches to this, but I think that what you described is more tuned to like fast progress and early market validation than some of these other, because some of the other ideas are write us a proposal, produce a business plan, and we'll give you $10,000 to $100,000. It's small dollars in the large enterprise, but it's good seed money. You know, maybe an idea like this where you show more progress first is good.
Not everybody wins, so there's people that lose out on
Yeah,
it.
that means it's probably has better, it's more valid. Justin, you were going to add?
Yeah, a lot of times enterprises have a problem with not actually being physically located together. So one branch off in one part of the country, you know, worldwide, whatever. How have you guys kind of combated that? Because if you don't have the decision makers or people that actually, you know, with regards to the product, with regards to
Yeah.
with regards to development, with regards to the QA, with regards to, I mean, all of that stuff, you can build stuff really quickly if you're all sitting at the same table.
Yeah.
You're literally around the world. How do you guys kind of combat that?
VUE has an advantage is that we're almost entirely in Bloomington and Minnesota, which is great. So when we're doing stuff for VUE, we're really focused. We have some acquisitions, that's not entirely true, but it's still really helped us relative to overall Pearson. Greater Pearson this is a much bigger challenge. I think what's happened for Pearson that's helped is about 5 or actually 6 years ago, they recognized they needed to increase collaboration. So our focus has gone from super broad to laser-like focused on international digital education. And at the same time, we have basically, Pearson for 5 years has pulled everyone in that mission through a variety of tools and shared experiences. So we have an online, like Facebook-like equivalent. It's a Jive instance. We call it Neo. You can find people working on the stuff you're interested in. If I have a problem in Angular, if I want to see who's used the validation board, technical or product questions, I can ask them on Neo and get answers across Pearson. Pearson also does a good job of running events for different communities, an annual tech summit that's increasingly brought people in. But it's a very hard problem. And it's the one thing where, I mean, as an example, we had to compete for the ability to own a claim. There were a company as large as Pearson has a couple logical owners that could own that project. We competed very well, but you know, it's a challenge in a large enterprise. I think if both the initiatives I talked about, the shared experiences and the Neo site, are both CEO level directives types initiatives. So your enterprise has to be doing those types of things to pull people together. We have one more minute. I'll stay until the next session, but other final questions or thoughts? All right. Thank you very much. Oh, one more. Go ahead.
You said you have a hard time with the lean measurement. What specifically is it that you haven't?
That was a comment because if you go to the literature, I think it's the weakest part of Eric Ries's Blue Book, or maybe I didn't get it when I read it. But it doesn't translate into a set of things that you can be looking at that are, everything else about the methodology is very disciplined and concrete. So I've had a harder time finding examples of how organizations were changing their metrics. And then the second side of that is enterprises value the wrong things. So that makes it tough. All right. Great. Thank you very much.